Well, let's continue with this tonight. The country's latest crime figures show that kidnapping is increasing, which has raised the question about who is most at risk and why. Among 65 countries where official statistics are available, South Africa has the third highest rate at 9.6 kidnappings per 100,000 people. These figures coming out of 2017. We know that the quarterly crime statistics give a much more detailed picture in terms of what those figures look like on an annual basis. Now, given the wide-ranging motives associated with kidnapping, tackling the crime requires a multi-pronged response. We're joined now by social justice activist Lorenzo Davis, Tertia de Klerk, who is with the National Freedom Network, and criminal law expert Ian Allis. Good evening to all of you, and thank you so much for being part of this conversation. So quite alarming when we look at where we are with the state of kidnappings in this country. I'm going to ask the team just to bring up some of those figures to give our viewers a sense of what has happened. So you'll see that the green line there representing the figures from the 2021 and 2022 financial years, and the blue line is speaking to the 2022-2023 financial years, and this is where we are. You can see that is an incredibly stark increase. Let me begin in studio. Ian, you'll have the privilege of proximity tonight. Why do you think these numbers are escalating at the levels that we are seeing, and what's driving it?
Thank you very much, Kathy. The fact is that kidnapping is a very broad term, and it falls under the whole concept of extortionary-based and monetary-based profiteering from crime. The fact is that with the kidnapping, it's at so many different type of levels, all from your lowly scams all the way to your highest highest echelons of its own business scheme and its own business model, which the reason is there's profit to be made, and it's about money. At the end of the day, these are crimes that are taking place not out of passion, not for any other heated argument. They are there simply because they generate money for people, whether it's through the trafficking circles or through ransom payments or even through arbitrary scams at the lowest possible level, or even as a quick fix to try and get somebody's cards in the basic type of and their PINs and access to their bank accounts in the shortest and most brutal type of a way. That all falls under the exact same banner, and it's all about the money, if one could say it that way.
Lorenzo, let me come to you. Do you think that we have particular patterns along which kidnappings take place in this country?
Hi, Kathy, and to your viewers as well. Yeah, I think there are definite patterns that we see emerging. I think that the rise that we're seeing in the kidnapping rates, and Ian is absolutely correct, it's linked to extortion, it's linked to quick revenue, and it's linked to business, is this notion that with the sort of heavy prosecution and action we've seen on cash in transit heists, that particular factor, that particular type of crime has moved somewhat to the kidnapping scenarios. So now you have people who are no longer putting their lives at risk in gun battles on freeways and on our cities' highways. They are now going and extorting people. They are now kidnapping people and can make a fair amount of money, not the same volume, but a fair amount of money. And that's why you're seeing this rapid increase in the numbers of kidnappings, because they are making up the volumes they have lost in other areas of crime, such as cash in transit heists.
Just before I let you go, Lorenzo, I mean, is there a link in terms of who then becomes at greatest risk for kidnapping?
Kathy, it is completely opportunistic. So our foreign nationals, Somalis, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, who have moved into townships and have in some ways replaced indigenous business operations within townships, such as spaza shops and others, they are the targets. They are the ones that are facing the brunt of this extortion and kidnapping. And so you are seeing that whereas traditional labor has in some ways been replaced, the income from that labor has not been replaced. So people are now saying, okay, you've taken our opportunity away, but we still want the money. And that is a very, very scary development within this. Because the people who might have lost businesses now or have been replaced by others who trade at a more economic level are now saying, we still want the money, we still want the revenue. And that's the big risk.
Tertia, Lorenzo speaks about, the fact that you're seeing effectively the crackdown on cash in transit heist then resulting in an increase in another form of crime. What does it say? I mean, are we to assume that it would be the same kind of sophisticated operations, criminal networks such as those that run cash in transit heists that would be behind some of these kidnappings?
Yes, I think that is something that I can definitely agree with, because we have to remember that when it comes to human trafficking, human trafficking is not only abduction and kidnapping. There are so many other forms of human trafficking. And one of the forms is actually forced illegal activity. So I think that can also be a link. And one thing that I really believe that we must always keep in mind, and I think most of us are tired of referring back to the pandemic, but for those of us who actually work on the ground when it comes to human trafficking, we've seen a dramatic increase in online grooming as well as online pornography use, and that actually fuels human trafficking. But besides that, we've also seen an increase in job scams. And traffickers have actually been taking advantage of the negative effect that the pandemic has had on individuals and families. So job scams are one of the top ways in which traffickers lure foreigners into South Africa with the so-called promise of a better future.
So let me then come back to you in studio, Ian. With so many different people then that can be targeted, what do we need to be keeping in mind as South Africans? And especially then, what are the things that we can do to protect ourselves?
Number one, you've got to be very, very vigilant, especially when you're dealing with various forms of opportunity. A prime example, and this has been seen, it's gone viral. Parents need to be very cautious with their children in shopping carts, in their prams when they go out to shopping malls, because there's been an increase in shopping mall kidnappings as well. And there's often other parties who are involved, all the way from the security to the car guards to the shop employees. One has to be, unfortunately, extra vigilant as far as your children in actual fact go, because that deals with one aspect. Secondly, and Tertia mentioned this with regards to the online scamming. There's also a lot of online scamming for job interviews. If it sounds too good to be true or sounds too strange, look on other support groups, look on the internet, look on Facebook and there's various membership type of groups where if it doesn't sound right, post something, because you never know what may in actual fact be out there and how many other people may have already fallen victim to it and can actually advise. The problem that actually happens with a lot of these scamming syndicates, people are scared to come forward, especially when it comes with the police, because of the lack of protection that they receive.
Lorenzo, this kind of crime, how well reported do you think it is in South Africa? And one of the countries that comes to mind is a country like Nigeria, where we know in some parts of that country, kidnappings for ransom have become, commonplace. And, of course, once it's allowed to develop and fester into this network, very hard to then bring it to an end.
Yeah, I think we have a huge underreporting on most crimes. And with the rise in kidnappings, we're going to see a further underreporting on these cases. Now, people are scared. I mean, when your loved ones are trapped in the hands of someone who demands and extorts money from you, then you have difficult choices to make. And they demand that you don't tell the police. They demand that you drop cash somewhere. Then many of those crimes will now go underreported. And we run a huge risk here. We are seeing a society that lacks the professional intelligence of a police service that is on top of this. In a recent meeting with the Muslim Judicial Council, the Minister of Police said that we need to do more. Now that is reactionary. We should have a police service that is doing a lot more already. We should have an intelligence service that is far ahead of what is happening. We stay being reactionary, and that for me is very, very concerning. And that is going to drive people to not talk about the extortions, the kidnappings that they are subjected to because of the risk that they face, that the police is not on top of what they are bringing to the police and will put their family members and partners' lives at risk. And that's a big risk we face.
Tertia, one of the things that we see, of course, as people responding then to this high level of insecurity is the hiring of private security guards. And in some instances, you'll have young children that are escorted to schools by private security.
Yes, I think that, at the end of the day, I just want to point back at what was mentioned earlier, is we have to be very careful, when it comes to social media and mainstream media, it is very easy with just one sentence to actually raise fear within communities, and that is one thing that we really need to work on avoiding. But to be overly careful, I don't think, of course, there's anything wrong with it. But what I also want to say is, also linking back with the previous speaker, is that we need to create awareness. We need to work on prevention. And a lot of that weight is currently weighing on NGOs. NGOs are now finding themselves in a spot where we are actually trying to fill the gaps that government is supposed to do automatically, such as creating awareness and bringing protection into communities, etc.
Do we have any idea, Lorenzo, in terms of, with these high kidnapping rates, how much of them result in death where there has been little compliance?
Kathy, I don't think we have accurate data on how many of our kidnapped victims have never returned or have been killed by their kidnappers. And again, that's going to be an alarming statistic once we have the full picture of this. And I think it is, I agree with Tertia that we shouldn't be alarmist about this, but I think we're living in a period where this has now become a very serious crime that ordinary people are subjected to. You can leave your home and be hijacked. You can go to your business and be hijacked. You can disappear and nobody knows where you are and believe that you may be a subject, have been subjected to hijacking. So this crime is so deeply ingrained into the mystery of it that we have to be extremely vigilant. Now the assumption must be if you don't pitch up at work, if you don't come, to a function that you've RSVP'd for, and you can't be traced, then the possibility is that you might have been kidnapped. That's a very real part of the South African fabric at the moment. And so I want to avoid being alarmist, but I also want to be real about this. That's what people are living with, and that fear is going to grow in this country.
Ian, let me come to you and wrap it up here. Ultimately, yes, there is this high insecurity, but as long as there's no accountability, as long as we're not seeing convictions, it continues then to be a crime that pays for those that are behind it.
Oh, and the profit margins on it, and that's why you look at it as a business, far exceed what your losses are and what your risks are from that perspective. So it is going to go ahead and continue, and it's going to escalate. The factor is you've got a lot of syndicates operating in conjunction with one another. There's a huge market. At the moment, South Africa is being viewed as a bit of a magnet for crime because of the lack of resources. It's been viewed as a bit of a lawless state. So those are all the ingredients that one needs for a boiling pot of this magnitude to just get worse, and with the inadequate statistics and limited resources and follow-up, it's certainly not going to get better, and it's going to get a whole lot worse because and we are going to be simply going a similar way as certain other countries have been, where they looked at as very high risk. And it's going to get progressively worse from that, especially in regards to an organized crime activity such as kidnapping.
All right. So I guess then we all need to be a lot more aware, start educating ourselves?
We have to be very vigilant for ourselves, vigilant for our children, vigilant what gets posted on social media, being also vigilant on what our children are being exposed to via social media, via, if one could say, the television and the different modes. These are all grounds that lead to something. It's not what you get in the movies where you have one person who can take on the entire organized crime syndicate and go shooting and everything's okay.
And bring it down.
Exactly. It's not a Rambo type of scenario. It is very serious. And it is going to escalate, especially in the current circumstances where money is tight and there's different resources being applied to different aspects.
Ian Allis, criminal law expert, let me thank you for your time. Lorenzo Davids is a social justice activist, and Tertia de Klerk is with the National Freedom Network. Let me thank you all for your contributions to this conversation.